Researchers, as well as contemporaries of the promiscuous emperor, are sure that his mother made him like that. Agrippina, an ambitious and domineering woman, never showed her son motherly feelings, was cold to him, and was generally not interested in her son. Moreover, the mother categorically did not accept Nero's passion for music, poetry, wood carving, and art at all. The child had a really vivid and inquisitive mind.
The most evil man in Roman history is unfair and exaggerated. Others point to his reign as a time marked by widespread violence, cruelty, and corruption. Several key factors that contributed to Nero's reputation as a despised emperor, including his lack of experience and competence, his persecution of Christians, and the political instability and conspiracy that marked his reign. The key factors that contributed to Nero's reign being marked by cruelty and corruption was his lack of experience and competence. Nero was just 16 years old when he became emperor, and he had little practical experience in governance or administration. He was heavily influenced by his mother, Agrippina, who was a powerful and ambitious figure in her own right. Many historians believe that she played a major role in shaping his policies and decisions. Nero's lack of experience and competence was evident in his response to the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. The fire was still raging. Nero reportedly played his lyre on a rooftop and sang songs about the burning of Troy. Callous disregard for the suffering of the Roman people earned him widespread condemnation and led to accusations that he had started the fire himself in order to clear space for his new palace, the Domus Aurea. Another factor that contributed to Nero's reputation as an evil man was his persecution of Christians. Christianity was a relatively new and growing religion in the Roman Empire, and many Romans saw it as a threat to traditional Roman values and customs. Nero was particularly hostile to Christianity, and he launched a brutal crackdown on the early Christian church, which he saw as a threat to his authority. Nero's persecution of Christians was marked by widespread violence and cruelty. He had Christians arrested, tortured, and executed in public spectacles, often using them as human torches to light his garden parties. The brutality of Nero's persecution of Christians was so extreme that it earned him the nickname, the Beast, among his contemporaries. Another factor that contributed to Nero's reputation as an evil man was the political instability and conspiracy that marked his reign. Nero faced opposition from the Senate and the aristocracy, who resented his youth and inexperience, and from the Praetorian Guard, who saw him as a puppet of his mother. He was also the subject of several assassination plots, including a major conspiracy led by the governor of Spain, Galba, in 68 AD. Nero responded to these threats with increasing paranoia and cruelty. He executed several prominent members of the Senate, including his former mentor, the philosopher Seneca, and he launched a brutal crackdown on political opponents and religious minorities. Nero's reign was marked by violence and instability, and his paranoia and cruelty only served to exacerbate these problems. In his reign, Emperor Nero was known for his outrageous and scandalous behavior. One of the most notorious aspects of his lifestyle was his penchant for hosting extravagant orgies that lasted for days on end at his massive palace, Domus Aurea, in Rome. These events, guests indulged in excessive eating and sexual activity until they were exhausted. In addition to these wild parties, Nero had a disturbing fetish that involved tying naked girls and boys to stakes and pretending to attack them dressed as a wild animal.
He was a beast.
Nero's sexual exploits extended beyond his orgies and fetish. He forcibly took the wives of Roman senators as his mistresses and even had sex with a Vestal virgin, which was punishable by death. However, as emperor, he was above the law and faced no consequences for his actions. Nero's behavior was so scandalous that he even played the role of a bride at his marriage to freedman Pythagoras, complete with a bridal veil and consummation in front of guests. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of Nero's personal life was his relationship with his mother, Agrippina the Younger. Agrippina was a powerful and ruthless figure who had helped Nero ascend to the throne by poisoning his predecessor, Emperor Claudius. To solidify her control over Nero, Agrippina seduced and had sexual relations with her own son. At least that was the rumor. Nero eventually realized the threat his mother posed to his reign and attempted to kill her in a staged boat-sinking incident. When this failed, he had her executed in broad daylight by his own executioners. Another important aspect of Nero's reign was his policies towards the provinces and foreign policy. Nero inherited a large and complex empire, and he faced several challenges in maintaining control over the various provinces and territories under Roman rule. One of Nero's most notable foreign policy actions was his decision to invade and conquer the kingdom of Armenia. This was a significant achievement for Nero, as it gave Rome control over an important strategic region in the Middle East. However, Nero's handling of the situation was marked by violence and instability, and he faced significant opposition from the Parthians, who saw the Roman invasion as a threat to their own interests. Nero's policies towards the provinces were also controversial, with many accusing him of neglecting their needs and interests in favor of his own personal projects and ambitions. He was criticized for his extravagant spending on building projects and cultural patronage. Some saw as a waste of resources that could have been better spent on improving the lives of ordinary people. Nero's reign also marked the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, which had been in power since the reign of Augustus. His death in 68 AD marked the beginning of a period of instability and political turmoil in the Roman Empire, which would ultimately lead to the rise of the Flavian dynasty under Vespasian. In conclusion, Emperor Nero's reign was marked by controversy, violence, and instability. Some historians argue that his reputation as the most evil man in Roman history is unfair and exaggerated. There is no denying that his policies and actions were marked by cruelty, corruption, paranoia. Nero's lack of experience and competence, his persecution of Christians, and the political instability and conspiracy that marked his reign all contributed to his reputation as a despised emperor. However, his personal life and policies towards the provinces and foreign policy were also significant factors that shaped his legacy.
Yeah, y'all, them Romans was known for having wild sex parties and all types of shit. You know what I'm saying? That's just a look into Neo past, Roman. Like I said, it's good to study a little bit of everybody's history so you can know what you're talking about when you talk about it. And we all know about Alexander the Great. We're going to get into, what's his name? Caesar, Julius Caesar. He was a freak. These dudes was... Hold on, where is that? "66 sailors eaten by cannibalism." You know what I'm saying? Where you at? Is this it? Nah, they the Funneling Fathers. There you go, right here. Oh, that's the gladiators. The gladiators and shit, y'all. Them Romans was freaks, y'all. Here you go, right here.
With which he denied all those accusations all his life. Speaks about the speed in which some battles were fought. These words belong to one of the greatest military strategists, dictators, orators, and prolific writers that the ancient Roman people had as a leader. A great conqueror of not only territories, but also the hearts of many women. It was rumored by his enemies that he even had homosexual inclinations. Accusations that were not enough to bend the absolute power he had established. A story of power, victory, and betrayal that draws the life of Julius Caesar, full of cruelty and scandals, creating an ambiguous empire, emerging victorious in almost all of his confrontations, and only being defeated by the sharp stab of deception. Today, we'll talk about these dark patches that make up the painting of his reign. Welcome to Copernicus's galaxy. The scandal that shook the whole of Rome. Being called homosexual to this day continues to be an effective way to offend and discredit many men, despite the fact that we boast of being a more advanced society than those existing thousands of years ago. We may have more technology, but in social matters, we have not come far, because our social construction continues to be mostly intolerant of diversity in tastes and beliefs, demonizing any individual who does not fit into what for them is considered normal, and using these different qualities as weapons to attack them. In Roman politics, it was completely legal to refer to the private lives of senators and ridicule them for their physical defects in any formal debate in order to detract from their authority, dignity, and respect. Julius Caesar was called the Queen of Bithynia, the man of all women and the women of all men, and the pillow of the royal litter, despite being known for his unquenchable thirst for women, having at least 5 lovers among the nobility, including Servilia, wife of Marcus Junius Brutus, and Cleopatra, with whom he supposedly fathered an illegitimate son named Caesarion, and credited with drafting a law that would allow him to marry as many women as he wished. His reputation as a womanizer was not enough to quell the rumors born on a diplomatic trip he was sent on at the age of 19 to assemble a squadron of ships and attack Mytilene on the island of Lesbos, where he met the king of Bithynia, Nicodemus IV, a former friend of his father's, who received him with singular joy. While there, the future Roman ruler took longer than expected, a fact that his enemies used as irrefutable proof that he had been seduced by the old monarch.
Lesbo was a lesbian island. Do the research on Lesbo Island. All lesbians.
In a story where Julius Caesar was taken by the king's attendants to his chambers, dressed in purple clothes and lying on the bed of sovereign, waited to be submitted, portraying him not only as a homosexual, but as a passive lover, which, despite not being punishable by ancient Roman law, was highly frowned upon as a debilitating attitude and typical of women. This added to his taste for keeping his physical appearance always perfect for any situation, cutting his hair, shaving and waxing regularly, as well as dressing in a flashy way, made the stories that his enemies told about him more creditable. This would haunt him for the rest of his life, despite denying it on many occasions and even offering to swear before witness that it was a slander against him, becoming one of the few things that made him lose his temper in public. Nowadays, it's difficult to prove or disprove the stories told by Julius Caesar about his inclinations or what happened in Bithynia at that time, but due to the firmness with which he denied all those accusations all his life, and the lack of any other situation similar to the story told by his opponents, it points to the fact that everything was an elaborate as well as executed ruse to undermine the authority and respect of then Roman ruler. Nobody cared in the least to investigate the veracity of what was told. Julius Caesar's merciless punishment of the pirates who kidnapped him. Everyone has heard of the exploits of the greatest dictator of the Roman Empire, Julius Caesar, during his rule. But this great character did not always have absolute power. Few know his story before his rise in politics. Despite being born into one of Rome's most important aristocratic families, he had to be strictly educated and work hard to achieve his great ambitions. After his family fell out with the then dictator Sulla, the future ruler of Rome traveled far away to wage war and gain prestige, stationed for a time in Cilicia, where he devoted himself to the study of politics and oratory. At the age of 25, Julius Caesar, determined to perfect his studies in philosophy and rhetoric, set sail for the roads by ship through the dangerous waters of the Mediterranean, a territory plagued by numerous pirate ships. The chances of being plundered by these sea wolves were high, and in the end, it ended up happening on the coast of Pharmaconasi, taking the young patrician as a hostage. Julius Caesar spent 38 days with his captors, but at no time did he behave like a prisoner. From the moment of the negotiation for his ransom, he was proud as he was alone, demanding that they ask at least 50 talents for him, which was equivalent to 1,550 kilograms of silver, or approximately 1.5 million euros today, as he was extremely offended by the first proposal of 20 talents from his pirates, considering it little for what he was worth. While the amount for his ransom was collected, the future ruler entertained himself, writing poems and speeches that he exposed in front of the pirates, hoping that they would give him an ovation. But if this didn't happen, he got upset and insulted them by telling them that they were illiterate savages. He treated them as humble servants, whom even dared to shut up when he was about to sleep and threatened to crucify them once he was free. In spite of all this, his captors did not beat or torture him, for they considered the whole thing amusing, believing that his words were no more than that. But Julius Caesar did not talk for the sake of talking. Once his ransom was paid and he was released, he did not waste a second and headed for Miletus to begin preparations for his revenge, where he recruited a flotilla of mercenary ships, with which he returned to capture the pirates, who were still on the same island enjoying the juicy payment they had obtained. He captured most of those sea creatures and recovered a good part of the 50 talents before taking them back to the governor of the area to take charge of their fate. But the governor was more interested in recovering the rest of the loot and profiting from the new prisoners by selling them as slaves. Dissatisfied with the governor's decision, Julius Caesar personally took charge of executing them as he promised. He took them out of the prison and beheaded them and then crucified them one by one. This story, like many others we know about Julius Caesar, was compiled by the Greek writer, biographer, and philosopher Plutarch, who lived approximately 150 years after the famous dictator walked among the living. Although the reliability of the writer's sources is recognized, it's never mentioned specifically where the information came from. This, along with Caesar's love for the self-promotion by embellishing his actions, created the suspicion that the story is not exactly as it's told. His love life was complicated. In ancient Rome, it was often seen that men would calm their libido with any woman other than his wife, and the latter who would turn to a blind eye, having to keep 3 virtues that were believed to be proper of a good woman, one of them being fidelity, ironically. If in itself a life full of love triangles is complicated, Julius Caesar also had to deal with other problems in his formal love relationships. The first of his 3 wives was Cornelia, daughter of the consul Lucius Cornelius Cinna, whom he married at the age of 16.
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I was diagnosed with AFib. The first...
The consul Lucius Cornelius Cinna, whom he married at the age of 16 in 84 BC. Their marriage had many hard times. Of the 15 years they were together, a third of the time they did not live together due to the travel and anonymity of the new dictator of the Roman Republic, Lucius Cornelius Silius, who forced him to flee to preserve his life for having refused to divorce Cornelia. During the time he was a fugitive, he contracted malaria and was even captured by Sulla's men, to whom he had to pay almost all his money to allow him to leave. Sometime later, with the help of influential relatives of the future governor, he obtained permission to return to Rome with his wife, with whom he had a daughter in 76 BC. They named her Julia Caesarius, the only legitimate descendant of Julius Caesar, and whom they married years later to Pompey Magnus, thus reinforcing the bonds of union of the first triumvirate. During the delivery of their second child, both Cornelia and the child died. The now widowed Caesar organized an ostentatious public funeral for her, typically only of elderly noblewomen, as a token of his genuine affection. Of course, without passing up the opportunity to capitalize on it for his political career. 9 years later, Julius Caesar married again. It was now Sulla's granddaughter, Pompeia, who would be his wife in 67 BC. This marriage was considerably shorter and unhappy due to his fiery affair with Servilia, which would be made public in this period and an accident during the festivities of honor of the Bona Dea, held in the house of Caesar. These were religious celebrations presided over by Vestal virgins and dictated exclusively to women, where secret rituals were performed in which no man was allowed to be present. During the event, suspicions of adultery against Pompey were born due to the discovery of a man who sneaked into the celebration and who was supposedly the lover of Julius Caesar's wife at the time. Given the gigantic scandal that arose as a result of this accident, the future ruler decided to divorce Pompey, arguing that his wife should be free not only of guilt, but even of any suspicion. With Calpurnia, the third and the last of his marital unions, he was married for the rest of his life. Their union was celebrated in 59 BC and lasted until Caesar's assassination in 44 BC. However, in those 15 years of marriage, they barely lived together due to the absence of Julius Caesar, who spent most of his time in military campaigns outside Rome. She spent all of those years as a discreet woman, faithful to the social values. She never complained to Caesar about his cynical infidelities with Servilia, nor those with the Queen of Egypt, Cleopatra, whom he lodged in a villa on the other side of the Tiber River, and with whom he would even have a son. It is said that days before the assassination of the most powerful man in Rome, Calpurnia had prophetic nightmares that warned her of her husband's fate, but despite her pleas, he attended the Senate session where he was betrayed. The violent death of Julius Caesar. What did his guards do? The man who had won 4 different wars, who had consolidated an empire, the one who paraded triumphantly through Rome on a chariot followed by displays of great loot obtained in his battles, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, seemed invincible until the arrival of March 15th, 44 BC. Julius Caesar had a large number of enemies, many of them senators with a certain amount of power, and whose business and interests were affected by Caesar's legislation. The discontent of these people had been brewing for some time, and they saw the opportunity to get the enemy out of the way when he dissolved the protective escort of Hispanic auxiliaries in a gesture of political normalcy after the Senate approved to swear an oath of allegiance to him. Gaius Cassius, Marcus Junius Brutus, Decimus Junius, and 60 other people spent months planning how they would give him the coup de grace. It was decided that it would be during the Ides of March in a meeting he had with his closest collaborators. One day before, his wife Calpurnia had a premonitory dream about her husband being violently murdered. Such images shocked the woman to such a degree that she had asked Julius Caesar to stay at home that day instead of attending the Senate meeting. However, Decimus Brutus, one of the conspirators, managed to convince him to attend with the excuse it's necessary to leave matters settled before a future trip out of the country that the ruler would make. Caesar went alone to his meeting, without a single guard to protect him. Once the meeting began, a handful of senators clustered around him, pretending to ask for favors. Lucius Tullus Cimber begged him to pardon his brother, who was in exile at the time, pulling his toga to uncover Caesar's shoulder, thus giving the signal for Casca to give him the first stab in the back. Followed by the first came the others. In total, the daggers entered the governor's body 23 times, the last being by Marcus Brutus, son of his mistress, Servilia, to whom, according to some, Julius Caesar dedicated his last words, "You too, Brutus, my son?" before covering his face with his tunic in the last effort to preserve his dignity. About Caesar's last words, it's unlikely that he said them, coming rather from the dramatism injected by Shakespeare in his play based on the tyrant. In such a situation, it's unlikely that someone would use his last breaths of air to say such theatrical words. Instead, Julius Caesar managed to pull out an awl and wounded 2 of his attackers, who after his death were persecuted and tried. Julius Caesar was a great man who went down in human history for his impeccable oratory and for being a great military strategist. This does not mean that he was inherently good, and his actions didn't fit that term, but he was a man who undoubtedly left his mark on our history for better or for worse, and someone we'll probably continue to talk about right here at Copernicus's Galaxy. If you like the video and you're passionate about history and other intriguing facts, we'll invite you to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our videos.
There it is, y'all.